And you are live.
All right, good morning, committee, House Education, Thursday, March 27th, 2025. All right, we are continuing with our discussion of our strike all amendment of H 454. We'll sort of turn our attention once again to a refresher on our school construction bill this morning. Scheduling wise, I mean, we have the day to do our work. It would be great if we can get there. I just want to talk a little bit. We've all been barraged for days, and particularly as we sort of go down the home stretch here with lots of emails and maybe calls and texts on all of these things. And I just think it's just it goes to show that when we were told before coming here, we were gonna have to make hard decisions, that it's really true. I was sort of looking down the list of where people wanted to revisit in our language. And that's because each one of these is a really hard decision for everybody. I think Leanne and I are both representing groups of small rural communities, and the Articles of Agreement is something that is going to be a very hard decision.
Not just you, just saying that there's a couple of us here who are.
You're on my list here.
Yeah, but you guys don't care. But I brought that one up too.
Chris and others are struggling with what level do we hold private schools to the same level of accountability as public schools? Recognizing that they have served a longstanding function in our state. Rob has those issues as well. Aaron spoke yesterday about moving this along, and we don't know what the funding part of this is going to be and how it's going to affect our individual districts. Casey brought up the state board proposal. We've obviously been getting a lot of feedback on that. But there's a lot, there's just a lot we are being asked to decide on that's going to be hard. And we're all going to sort of, I would like to see us come out with a bill that most of us can support, obviously, because if most of us don't support it, it's not coming out of the committee. So let's just continue our work today, knowing that each of us has a hard decision to make about and moving this forward, and it's going to require, thought and compromise on all of our parts. But one area we can agree on is that we need a state school construction program, so we can turn our attention to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that the last new section we're planning to add, or do we even know that at this point?
That's the last substantial section to add. There may be I'm not quite sure where this is going to be, us or Ways and Means. There may be just asking JFO to do a study of okay.
Just to sort of wrap my thoughts around the work for the day,
Yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I would say I don't think we have anything else substantive.
Okay, thank you.
From our
Yes, I think we're just asking.
Yeah, like school construction, and like I said, there may be just some have JFO do a study of pre-K funding. Sure. All right, Beth, would you join us? But you may continue to focus on what you're doing while we sort of get ourselves together. Well, actually, maybe have you put 129 up on the wall, the screen.
Oh, you're gonna be crying so much today. You need those. I don't know why they're clustered around you.
I don't know why
I'm not sure.
I hate folders.
He can't understand why all the Kleenex are around him.
So let's really focus on the task at hand, being school construction.
Oh, okay.
And 129 should be available on our documents.
Yes, it's labeled as are you live?
Yeah.
South St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. It's labeled as school construction language for a minute.
Uh, maybe just to have you not walk us through line by line, but just sort of say, okay, section 1 is this, section 2 is that, just to refresh us, and be, I think, very helpful.
Of course.
And I would just say, as we do this, folks, let's not wait till the end. If you got a particular question or comment on a certain section, just stop and jump in.
And I will say, as you know, I once was the lead on school construction and I'm no longer the lead on school construction. So I apologize if you've already covered some of this with John. But what you have before you is the body of H129. I have not made any substantive changes to what was in 129, but I have added a few things that needed to be added if you want to advance this language. And I'm going to, before we do a brief high-level walkthrough, I'm going to scroll down just so you can see what those additions are. And that is 2 repeals. A repeal of section 3448 of Title 16, which is the current school construction program statute, which you are replacing with language above. And section 3448A, which is the appeal language that sits in current law, and this bill has new appeal language. So I believe that those repeals need to be added to give effect to what you are trying to do here. And then John cautioned me when we're all done, there is one piece of law that it sounds like he has provided some guidance to you all about considering repealing now. And I want to just come back to that briefly before you move off of this topic. So there's a statement of policy added. Do you want to go over any of this or just?
This has all been in here the whole time.
Yes,
Yeah.
nothing I'm about to walk through has changed
Yes.
since the last walkthrough you've had, or from the bill is introduced. So the policy has not changed. The state aid for school construction program has not changed at all. So it would be requiring AOE to implement a state aid for school construction program. And then this section lays out what the agency is responsible for in running this program. And then section 3 on the very bottom of page 3, line 19, creates the state aid for school construction advisory board, which would advise the agency on the implementation of state aid for school construction, including advice on the rules that the agency would be adopting, the priorities the agency would be adopting, the criteria for project approval, and the recommendations for project approval and prioritization. Again, this is an advisory board. The agency would be doing all of those things, and the advisory board would be advising the agency on those duties. The membership of the advisory board are 4 ex officio members: the treasurer, the commissioner of BGS, the executive director of the Vermont Bond Bank, and the chair of the State Board of Education or designee. And then 4 members who shall be current members of the General Assembly, 2 members appointed by the Speaker who have expertise in, none of whom shall be current members of the General Assembly. I got to the expertise in education or construction, real estate or finance, and I realized I need to go back there. So those members need to have expertise in those areas.
I'm sorry, you did say to jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just right on that line 21 where it says represent a supervisory union. I'm wondering whether we want to say supervisory union, supervisory district. I don't know. I'm just
I'll
trying
let
to
Beth answer
think.
this. She's answered the question many times.
Okay.
Supervisory union, unless otherwise indicated, includes supervisory districts. It's a whiskey bourbon situation.
That's right.
So all supervisory districts are supervisory unions, but not all supervisory unions are supervisory districts.
I guess thank you. That's helpful. But I'm also wondering whether it even needs to be supervisory union or district, whether it needs to be district. I'm just bringing it up.
The questions come up many times, and this is just
Okay.
the best catch-all term.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And then 2 members appointed by the Committee on Committees, again, expertise in education, construction, real estate, or finance, and then 1 of whom shall be an educator. 4-member terms. The duties, again, would be to advise the agency on all of its duties here, and those are explicitly spelled out. I think you may have looks like the effective date was 2026. So you may wanna,
Mhm.
should this be 2026, the
Yeah.
first meeting? Okay.
August 15th, 2025, we just got that date.
Yes, line 9.
How optimistic the
Work.
task force was.
It's legit.
And then there's a prospective repeal for the advisory board, which is we're attempting to make standard when you're creating advisory boards like this, so that there is a look back at some point on whether the board is necessary. And then there's language on page, the very bottom of page 7, line 22, section 5, creating a school construction aid special fund, which is essentially an account where the monies in that account would only be used for the enumerated purposes here. And those purposes are school construction aid for projects under section 3445. Awarding grants through the facilities master plan grant program that you all created last year. Administrative costs for the program, the state aid for school construction program, and awarding emergency aid under section 3445. And then the funds would consist of any amounts transferred or appropriated to it by the General Assembly and any interest earned by the fund. So you have to put funds into it.
So I have a question. We did not fund the facilities master plan grant program.
Correct.
I'm trying this, John Gray might be able to help us on this. I'm trying to follow Ways and Means simultaneously with all of our work this week, and I think, I don't know how it's gonna shake out, but they're contemplating a construct where some of excess spending waterfalls into school construction, so I don't know what we have to do legislatively here to make all of that connect or speak to each other, nor do I fully understand what's happening in Ways and Means. But
I think you've answered your own question. I think you need to wait for you can either ask me to go back and consult with Ways and Means and come back to you with something, or I think if this bill is going to Ways and Means, that's where that harmonization would occur.
All right, so timing wise, this calls for the advisory group to be put together by August 15th. I'm not quite sure why we would do August 15th versus July 1st or.
There has been difficulty in the past getting groups to hold a first meeting before August 1st.
Okay.
And so my office is trying to be consistent, and when we put these dates in, absent a specific directive to do otherwise, so you can certainly pick another date,
Yeah.
but history has shown us that that's hard.
Yes, in this case, however, we are doing the work in 2025.
Well, you would have to make sure your effective date then reflects that, because the effective date for this bill is 2026.
Okay.
So none of those appointments would be made, but you can certainly change that effective date so that the appointments are contemplated or made, but, far in advance of when the first meeting would occur.
All right, let me. That would seem to be, for that part of it, just the naming of the group. Maybe they don't, give you as much time as possible rather than somebody saying. All right, well, so let me just that's for the first meeting date. The creating it, like the naming of the people can all take place in advance of that significantly, right?
Not if the law doesn't go into effect
Okay.
until a date in the future. So if this language were to take effect on July 1, 2026, there would be no authority for anyone to appoint anyone to anything because nothing has taken effect yet.
Okay,
But you could, and we can do effective dates that are just for a subdivision or a subsection. So we can get creative here.
yeah, I guess I would like to give as much time as
Okay.
possible, and just
Understood.
on that part, to be effective and.
Do you want the whole? Because you can have the whole section take effect. But the first meeting doesn't occur until 2026, or do you just want the appointments to be made? I think you need the whole section,
Okay,
right? A body to appoint to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Got it. And then next, there's the special fund, which may need some harmonization based on, what Ways and Means is doing. And then on section 6, page 8, line 16, approval and funding of school construction projects. This is all of the criteria that would be, contemplated when looking at approving an application for state aid for school construction. And it would be the Agency of Education doing that approval and analysis. There is a requirement in here that the agency in its annual funding request to the governor include a recommendation for school construction funding. That would then come to you all. I'm skipping over all the details. Let me know if you want to go back and look at details.
I'm kind of reading them as.
Okay.
Yeah, me
go.
too. Yeah.
So here's just a question, and I could be jumping ahead. What is envisioned by the task force is a Rhode Island style funding system where rather than the state bonding for its portion of this, it would provide annual payments out of the general fund toward the bond payments of the school district. Do we say that explicitly? Do we need to say that explicitly? We just sort of say each year.
There's nothing in here authorized, so it requires a district to have voted bonds
Yeah,
in order to actually be eligible for school construction aid. And then, let's see. I don't think you need to explicitly state everything you've laid out. In order to qualify, a district has to have bonded for the total estimated cost of the project. And then they get 20%. They're eligible for, I believe the award is 20% of the eligible debt service
okay,
cost of a
all
project.
right, great.
So there
Thank you.
it is.
Yep.
Oh, and you even define debt service. I mean, the product of the lifetime cost of the bond authorized for the project and the ratio of the approved cost per project to the total cost of the project. So it's the eligible debt service. There's a provision in here for emergency aid. And then there's an appeal section. So a school district that is aggrieved by an award by the agency could appeal to the Superior Court in the county in which the project is located within 30 days.
I just want to go back up to the emergency, and just ask our members who are on the task force, is that something that should be enacted sooner than the full enactment of the bill? Was that the intent there?
I think we need clarification from AOE to answer that.
There's already, I mean, when we talk about the school construction program, there being a moratorium on the school construction program, it's just a moratorium on state aid. There is no moratorium, like the laws are still in place. There was no repeal of the current laws, and I believe there's already a provision in current law for emergency. It's different than this.
Right, it's just the amount. I didn't know if they were looking for an immediate lift to the ceiling. I'm not sure we fund it. I tell you what, let's just keep this the way it is. We can get clarification. And when and if a miscellaneous ed bill comes back to us from the Senate, if it was meant to be more immediate, we can potentially make a change there, or frankly, encourage the Senate to make this change. Yeah.
Could those changes be made in one of the other committees it's gonna go to before that? Would that be a change Ways and Means
Yeah.
could make, or
If we asked
appropriations?
to make it, we could actually, frankly, actually give our own scheduling,
Yeah.
we can make an amendment on the floor as
Sure.
well.
Yep.
Yeah.
I like it.
The appeal language, we just talked about, transfer of rulemaking authority. So currently, the State Board of Education owns the school construction rules. And so here's standard language to transfer rulemaking authority. So the rules that are currently in place would be transferred to AOE. And then those rules would then become AOE's rules until they are amended or repealed by AOE in a normal rulemaking APA process. And that transfer of those rules would need to be, notice of that would need to be provided to the Secretary of State and LCAR. And that's standard language when we're transferring rulemaking authority. And then the repeals that I talked about are repealing the current law that would conflict with what you have enacted or are attempting to enact here. And then the effective date for the intent, all of these sections right now is July 1, 2026. We're gonna make section 3, which is the advisory board, effective 7/1/2025. So again, policy question for when, if the rest of these sections you're okay with the July 1, 2026 effective date. And then when you are ready, I want to show you one piece in chapter 123, the school construction statute, that I think John has talked to you all about, and a decision hasn't. been
Do
made
we have compensation for people on the advisory committee?
on. Yes.
Question about effective date. Is it an issue having it be July 1st, 2026 because of the rulemaking moving over and that having to be, that process having to be completed? Is that a
Better
problem
question.
or not?
Yeah.
Or
I don't,
should be okay? I just don't know.
if you had a whole pot of money right now.
Right.
And we're
Right.
ready to
Right.
stand up this program,
I'm thinking it's.
I think that would be more crucial. My understanding is that you don't.
And districts
This
haven't
is-
formed and everything's. in
And so it's
flux,
really
so,
it's a
okay.
really a policy decision.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
No, Ben, that's what, actually, your question was, should rulemaking move earlier so they can get started on the.
I was just
rulemaking?
wondering,
Yeah.
you know, because I know that there's a lot going on with the states having to make some rules of their own and changes. And
Yeah,
I don't
I
wanna-
appreciate the question because it's a good one. I think, legislative council probably right. We don't have any money in it anyway, so.
And we're not ready for it anyway with the transfer rate. Okay, thank you. Just checking.
Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is current law, section 3454, deferred maintenance. No state school construction aid, so actually, let me back up. This chapter's a mess. at some point, it would be lovely to clean some of this up. But for now, the only sections, you can see a whole host of these numbers are actually not currently active, right? They're sections that were previously active and have been repealed. But anywhere where you see language like this is current law. And so the only sections you are proposing to repeal is 3448 and 3448A. You're essentially replacing those with language in this bill. Everything else remains current law, absent you repealing it or making amendments to it. My understanding is there has been discussion over whether this section on deferred maintenance should be repealed or even needs to be repealed. So no state school construction aid shall be available under this title for any proposed project or construction if the secretary finds the need for the project or construction has arisen in whole or in part from significant deferred maintenance. The deferred maintenance is defined in state board rule. My understanding is there's been discussion because state aid has been paused for so long, whether virtually everyone would qualify as deferred maintenance under that state board rule. And so whether there needed to be amendments to this section or it needed to be repealed. Again, if you're not standing up this program until 2026, that's something that you could take further testimony on and mull over. But I just wanted to point this out.
Thank you.
Anybody want to join me in saying that probably should just be repealed, given the fact that we haven't had for almost 20 years construction aid?
Yeah.
Or we can deal with it later. You guys are.
To me, either way, honestly, I don't think, I don't think having it in there, if the secretary doesn't use that ability, then repealing it would be okay.
I mean, we have an advisory committee that would be looking at each project and saying, well, this should only get 10% because it's.
But I do agree that deferred maintenance isn't really a factor. It should be a factor in this. The whole state has deferred maintenance at this point.
Yeah.
Ain't that funny?
I mean, that is sort of what we asked, why we did the whole facilities inventory. To understand in detail our deferred maintenance, so. I'm trying to think through the other implications.
We also don't have to do anything. The program's not standing up. So rather than make a snap decision now, which I have a tendency to think is a great idea, maybe we'll put that off.
And that's it.
On this section, it would be helpful to get AOE feedback. I mean, this was developed quite collaboratively with AOE throughout the working group, so if there are changes needed. It's going to be easier to do it here. Every step of the way, it just gets more technically complex, so it would be helpful if we can. I don't think Lindsay's not in here right now, send an email. Yeah, we'll have that feedback in the next 24 hours.
Yes, agreed. Might be a little challenging, since the deputy secretary who does this is in Washington learning about everything. Yeah. Annie?
Yes.
Would you please see if, somebody from AOE could give us some feedback on H129 before we put it in? Even if that has to be, somebody zooming in from another location.
Or written, Would you like Bob Ellenby?
Bob will be fine.
He's walking right now.
Yeah, Bob will be fine. If he's not comfortable, Jill will be the next likely person. Discussion here, so the two of you came back from this work and said, gee, I don't know, it seems kind of like we, put this together rather quickly. So I am continuing to try to find fault with it, and I'm having trouble.
Or faith that was gonna make that.
The,
I mean, the rubber meets the road on the money and the defining of the
of the,
prioritization.
which is a job for the
Right,
advisory
which we're
committee.
not doing, so that's,
Uh,
it's your favorite way to.
yes, I would also, I might say that because the implementation for this is not until July 1st, 2026, that should things that were unknown or unimagined or based on further thought come to fruition, we have another legislative session to make modifications to it. But I think it is good for our bill to have this in here to say, if we are going to talk about scale, that we also need to talk about school construction. And it sort of puts out there, we talked about it, and now if people are serious about scale, it needs money.
Yeah, I agree. I think this needs to be in there. I also think having this in there will open it up to a lot more eyes, to take a look at it and give us some more feedback in case we need to do some work to it next session.
Agreed.
So, hearing that, I'll ask legislative council to go ahead and fold it into the bigger bill.
What bucket should it go in?
Oh,
Does it need its own bucket?
Scale.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's got scale.
Your scale section is really tipping the scale.
Yeah.
Higher,
Not
drones,
surprising.
higher.
That's adorable.
I'm a word guy, I like it.
It could have its own, it could have its own bucket.
We need to start it with the actual scale.
All right, folks, further discussion on that. Does everybody feel good about taking this and folding it into the bigger bill?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
I
not
do.
seeing any opposition.
I feel comfortable with it. I actually would have rather seen it bill because this bill is controversial in many aspects, and I think that program needs to stand up no matter what.
Yeah.
So I do think it needs to be in here, but I think it's unfortunate that's not a scandal.
Yes, we probably agree, and, regardless of what happens to the bigger bill, we'll find our way to at least get this done. As best we can.
Good.
Okay, all right, well, I'm not gonna give us a break because we've only been in here for a half an hour.
That's all.
So while we have legislative council in front of us, perhaps you could provide some feedback to us from your point of view about the state boards. So, and then we have, at 2:30, we'll have lawyer for the administration come in and talk to us further about that.
Sure. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, let me pull up. Bill. I do have some notes. Unfortunately, given the timing of it, I was not able to draft a beautiful memo for you as I prioritized drafting your bill. But I have some prepared notes that I'd be happy to send to Annie when I'm done, if you'd like. I'm just pulling up the section here. So I first just want to say, you are the legislative branch. You are the policy making branch. My job is not to push you in either direction for a specific policy decision. It is to make you aware of your authority so that you can make those policy decisions. It is it is my opinion, it is your constitutional power to set the policy for the state. And that includes who's making appointments to the State Board of Education. So again, I am not here to try and help you make a policy decision in one way or the other. I am here to help you understand the limits of your constitutional authority. I see a big difference between choosing to make a policy decision for a myriad of policy reasons or not make a decision for a myriad of policy of reasons and making a decision not to do something because you believe it is unconstitutional. Those are two separate things, in my opinion. Policy and law. The other thing I want to start with is we've got three branches of government. You are the policymaking branch. The executive branch executes the laws, and the judicial branch, who we're not going to talk about much in this conversation except now and at the very end, interprets those laws. And it is only the judicial branch who could make a determination of whether what this bill proposes to do would be unconstitutional. I can give you my legal opinion, you can hear other legal opinions, but it is only a court, when someone challenges that law, that could definitively make a determination. Spoiler alert, I am not aware of any case law that has made that determination. So let me look through my notes here. Okay. So let's start with the Constitution. Chapter 2, Section 5 states the legislative, executive, and judicial. Actually, I'm going to share this with Annie and we can pull it up while I'm talking. So the legislative, executive, and judiciary departments shall be separate and distinct so that neither exercise the powers properly belonging to the others. That is directly from the Constitution. Annie, it's coming your way. Briefly stated, the legislative power is the power that formulates and enacts the laws. The executive power enforces them, and the judicial power interprets and applies them, right? Again, it is only a court that could definitively tell you anything you are proposing is unconstitutional. Chapter 1, Article 5 states the people of this state by their legal representatives have the sole, inherent, and exclusive right of governing and regulating the internal police of the same. This is your police powers. This provision is commonly referred to as legislature's police power, and that means the General Assembly can pass laws for the general welfare of the people and is itself the judge of the necessity or expediency of the means adopted. You are the judge of the necessity or expediency of the means adopted. You all have practically absolute power. The Constitution is not a grant of power to the legislature. It is a limitation of its general powers. Your power is practically absolute except for constitutional limitations. So if the Constitution doesn't tell you you can't do something, and a court has not told you you can't do something, what is the natural conclusion we can draw from that?
You can do it.
For now,
Say that again.
You can do it.
until a court.
And even then it depends on which
Right,
court.
right.
And even then, sometimes the courts don't get it right, but we have to follow what they say. Annie, would you tell me when it's up so I can share my screen?
Yes.
Thank
it
you.
is up, currently. In like 10 seconds.
Okay.
Oh,
So that's your power. You have pretty much absolute power unless the Constitution or a court tells you otherwise. And the court, anyone want to guess what the court is looking to? If it is going to tell you whether something you have done is
Constitution.
exactly. So it's really the Constitution we're looking to. It's the Constitution the courts are looking to. What about the governor? What powers does the governor have? The governor, and I'm reading right from the Constitution, and I'm gonna bring this up right now, so we're all looking at the same thing. And again, apologies, this isn't some beautiful memo with a lot of prose. I can do that. I've linked to you the applicable portions of the Constitution. There's a lot of case law in here. I've quoted it. I'm not gonna go into more detail about each of these cases. We're gonna stick to the quotations. Governor, the governor shall have the power to appoint officers, except where provision is or shall be otherwise made by law or this frame of government. Who makes the laws?
We do.
So unless the Constitution indicates a specific entity has appointment power, the legislature, as the lawmaking branch of government, has the power to decide who or what entity makes appointments. You created the State Board of Education. This is not there are some states where the State Board of Education or its cousin is a constitutional body. That is not the case in Vermont. State Board of Education is a statutory body. You write the statutes. The appointment process for the State Board of Education members is not in the Constitution. What's the check on your power?
Constitution.
Not in there. Therefore, it is up to the legislature to decide the appointment process for the State Board of Education. You'll notice, those aren't quotations, those are my words, right? So how do we figure out where this separation of powers balance is? Well, our Supreme Court has provided us with some guidance. The focus of a separation of powers inquiry is not whether one branch of government is exercising certain functions that in some way pertain to another branch, but whether the power exercised so encroaches upon another branch's power as to usurp from that branch its constitutionally defined function. What does the Constitution define as the governor's appointment function? The governor shall appoint all officers except where you all decide otherwise. So we've got the judicial branch that I've already gone over, that they are the ultimate arbitrators of this. When courts are analyzing General Assembly's exercise of its legislative authority, they presume the legislative branch acted constitutionally. There is a presumption of a constitutional purpose on the part of the legislature, a presumption as strong perhaps as any that is not conclusive. That's from the Vermont Supreme Court. Courts will not hold a law unconstitutional unless it clearly conflicts with constitutional requirements. The efficient exercise of police power inherent in the people of the state is not to be frittered away by overnight speculations upon the distribution of powers of government. Again, that's a Supreme Court case. Every presumption is to be made in favor of constitutionality of an act of the legislature, and it will not be declared unconstitutional without clear and irrefragable evidence that infringes the paramount law. So you all, subject to constitutional limitations, are authorized to pass measures for the general welfare of the people of the state in the exercise of the police power. And again, you are the judge of the necessity or expediency of those means adopted. And in regard to your police power, the Constitution clearly empowered the legislature to pass such laws. This is what the Supreme Court is saying. In its discretion, it might judge would be for the common benefit of the people of the state. Again, another quotation from a Vermont Supreme Court case, Vermont Educational Buildings Finance Agency versus Mann. The traditional doctrine of separation of powers recognizes that lawmakers cannot deal directly with all functions of the sovereign. Neither can those functions be precisely divided. The General Assembly cannot transfer its supreme legislative power to enact laws, but it can confer upon the executive and judicial branches of the government or grant to a subordinate agency of its own creation a wide discretion in the manner and method for the execution of statutes validly adopted. Executive branch, aside from any constitutionally conferred authority given to a specific executive branch entity, you determine which laws the executive branch shall execute and how they must be executed. There has in the past, when this could come up, been a comparison to the President of the United States executive power. And that is not an apt analysis. The Vermont governor's supreme executive authority is not as broad as the president's exclusive executive power. In Vermont, we have multiple separately elected constitutional officers. They are not under the governor's control. Under the US Constitution, the president is vested with the executive power of the president. Additionally, the US Constitution grants the president the power to appoint all major officers of the United States. Period. The Vermont Constitution limits the governor's authority to appoint officers to the laws that you enact.
Except for conditions.
Similarly, the Constitution does not provide the governor with specific removal authority. So appointment, who has the power to remove an appointee? The Vermont Supreme Court adjudicated a challenge to the governor's authority to remove the members of the Public Service Commission who the governor had appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate. The court stated that whether the governor should have this power of removal is for the legislature to decide. We are not concerned with the expediency of the law. H 179, which is the underlying law that you're supposed to put in here, section 10, does not propose to amend the governor's removal authority. It's only about the appointment process. In a US Supreme Court case related to appointment powers, and once an officer is, I found this quote really effective. Once an officer is appointed, it is only the authority that can remove him and not the authority that appointed him that he must fear. And in the performance of his functions, obey. So if there is some sort of assertion that because the legislature or another entity is making an appointment, that those appointees would be somehow beholden to those appointees, I would argue that it's actually the person with the removal power that those appointees are more likely to be looking to appease. And if you're looking for a system of checks and balances, what better system than to have one authority be the appointer and one authority have the power of removal. If the legislature's participation ends once it makes a policy choice through the constitutional process of bicameralism and presentment, and then you delegate your authority to the executive branch, and then you're leaving it up to the executive branch to execute those laws, you're done. There should be no concerns over your intervention or another entity's intervention into executive branch decision makings once those appointments are made. The legislative process is ended. The governor has the power to remove those board members. The authority for the, there's also been discussion about rulemaking and that being an inherently either executive or legislative function. The executive branch, the authority for the executive branch to adopt rules is statutory. It is not constitutional. There is no inherent constitutional authority to adopt rules. Rulemaking is a power delegated to the executive branch by the legislature. There are several other boards or commissions in the state with non-governor appointees. I've linked to their enabling language here. Commission on Women, the State Ethics Commission has no governor appointees and no legislative appointees. The Racial Equity Advisory Panel, the Vermont Working Lands Enterprise Board, the Vermont Climate Council. The State Ethics Commission does have rulemaking authority. And I've just ended with this. Ultimately, it is only the judicial branch that may determine whether an action by one branch of government constitutes a usurpation of a separate branch's constitutionally defined authority. And I've put that here underneath all of these current boards that are currently functioning. Because I started with reminding you that it is only the judicial branch that can make a determination of whether an action you are taking or a law you are enacting is unconstitutional. And to my knowledge, there has been no challenge to the makeup of these boards. So to come in here and argue that the makeup of these boards is unconstitutional is not the right place to make that argument. The right place to make that argument for a legal argument is the court system. This is perhaps, depending on your viewpoint, the right place to make that argument from a policy perspective.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Always enjoy going to law school with our legislative council in limited doses. Representative
I
Brady?
just asked a clarifying question from that list you just showed us. You said the State Ethics Commission as rulemaking authority.
Yes. But remember, rulemaking authority,
Right. Not in the Constitution.
correct.
We can.
Opportunity here to ask probing legal questions.
Yes.
Beth?
Since I missed most of this conversation yesterday because I was on the floor. So the way we have 179 folded in now, the appointments, many of the appointments are shifting from the governor to a different appointment authority. But the removal authority is still the
Not
governor
changing.
Correct.
in the version, yeah. So others may appoint, but the removing authority still for the board is the governor. Okay, thank you.
Okay. There are, yes,
Will you show us again the State Ethics Commission makeup? Or who's choosing what seats?
Interesting.
This is the State Ethics Commission enabling section. One member is appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, one member is appointed by the League of Women Voters, one member is appointed by the Board of Directors of the Vermont Society of Certified Public Accountants, one member is appointed by the Board of Managers of the Vermont Bar Association, one member is appointed by the Board of Directors of the Society for Human Resource Management, Vermont State Council. One member shall be a former municipal officer appointed by the Speaker. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. There are 2 legislative appointments. There's no governor appointment. And then one member is a former municipal officer appointed by the Senate.
all right, just from first of all, any further questions on this topic? If not, just, talking a little bit logistically here, I have to leave at 20 after or so to do a press conference. And I might suggest that the committee take a break from then until maybe 11:15 or whenever I get back. Just a good chance to sort of talk among yourselves, digest what we've been hearing. In the meantime, wondered if we could visit one topic of our list of topics. This would be the Articles of Agreement section.
Let me read my 50 emails first,
There've been a few emails about it.
39.
So I would just say that this is one of those hard decisions that is unpopular with a segment of the population. But when we said we had to make difficult decisions in order to have a school system at scale, because scale is both good for kids and good for holding costs down in a state where we talk about affordability all the time. This is an important part of it. Will the removal of the town sort of veto power change anything in the next couple of years before we move to larger districts and the removal of Articles of Agreement altogether? I don't know. Maybe not, probably not. Except maybe in a couple of instances. So I'd just like to put out there that for many of us, this is a big deal. And so I would just like to put out there for consideration, moving the effective date 1 year as sort of a compromise for those of us who this is a hard one. Josh?
What negative implication to the whole bill or any part of it would moving the date 1 year? What negative implications could it?
Well, I guess the answer would be none that I can see. You know, when we move to larger districts and broader regional governance, all of these articles of agreement become moot. They cease to really exist. So this is really, again, talking in the interim phase. So it, you know, all it is doing is that if a school board is ready to close the school and waiting for us to remove this from the articles of agreement, it might delay that a year. I don't even know if that situation exists, and I highly doubt it does.
So you're saying that in your opinion, and I'll look and read more as I go, in your opinion, it wouldn't hamstring us trying to work through the transformation of education. It would just give the local municipalities, towns, maybe a little more time before something they feel is drastic.
Yeah, I guess conceptually, yes. I mean, frankly, it gives folks probably, we can look at it as it gives folks more time to get comfortable with the concept that's coming down anyway if we move towards larger districts and regional governance.
Thinking about it.
Emily?
Thank you. I want to express my strong support for this shift in date. I did mention it after Representative Harple brought it up yesterday, that it was a concern of mine too, and I gave it quite a bit of thought overnight. And we certainly did hear from plenty of people with concerns about it. I still deeply believe that a process to close a school requires the consideration of a community anyway, and any school board takes that very seriously. But I just think the timing is off to do this a year prior to when we're even going to, well, months prior to where we're even going to hear a report back from what our region recommendations are for regional shifts of our district. So I strongly support shifting the date. I think it's the right thing to do.
Other thoughts?
If that is the compromise that can help towns emotionally and strategically prepare for their futures, I'm totally for it. I guess me sleeping on it also has even more convinced me that I feel like we need to honor our articles of agreement. But I'm also kind of seeing I might not win that. And so, yeah, I want to sort of give towns as much preparation as they can for these big changes. The fact is that changes are still coming. I'm still receiving lots of emails that like we shouldn't be considering any consolidation at all, which is really frustrating because it just feels like that is happening. And so what can we do to sort of like help people adjust to the new? If that makes any sense. I have a lot of thoughts and trying to organize them all into coherent thoughts is challenging.
Great, Beth.
So long as we're not doing it just to push off a hard decision. Because these hard decisions are gonna have to be made.
Right.
And just, saying, oh, I have a lot of people who don't like this decision, so I'm not gonna make the decision. That's not what we're in this room for.
That's right.
So
I would say,
I want, for other reason besides kicking the can down the road.
yes, so this is making the decision unless a future legislature takes it back. And the larger regionalizing of our governance structure, where everything is a school district, and articles of agreement go away, it's for a future legislature to make that hard decision, but I think we've made it clear that that's what this bill envisions.
Do we have, the ability to show that consolidation yet, or districts would in fact save or level some funds? Cause that's the other question I keep getting is like, how can you take away the article of agreements if it's not even gonna save us money? And I'm really unsure how to respond to that.
Definitely have. those
It's not just about saving money, it's about
Yeah.
educational opportunities. And for me, that's the bigger concern,
Mine too.
that when a school is so small, I mean, like so small, that those students, and I get it, because I'm from that, cannot provide 21st century educational opportunities to students, but can't move to another option because of articles of agreement that force it to stay open. That's a bigger concern for me than the money.
You know, while we're in this in-between stage, if a school board chooses to close the school, that's not done in a vacuum. I mean, they're gonna have to show their people, they have to show their own board why it is an educationally and financially sound thing to do. Can we prove it in every instance? I don't know. It would be anecdotal, but we could look at Montpelier Roxbury and they saved $2 million.
Mhm.
And providing students with more opportunity.
And didn't fire any teachers or staff, didn't have to rip anyone, we brought them all over.
That's good.
Yeah, I think, a reality of the world is that we have such attrition right now that generally.
There's lots of openings.
Is there a way to write into the law in the same way that we talked about education quality standards and the waiver, the appeals process, that like, if a school could show that it would not save money and that they are meeting education quality standards within their small school, that they can keep their articles of agreement?
I think that gets very tricky, but just in the sense of like, who is showing who? A school board is in charge of that school.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, that's part of that process of us or somebody having to define small by necessity versus small by preference. The waiver process on class side, all of that is, I don't think, language that we in this room determine. I think that's left up to the state board and the AOE.
Aaron?
I certainly support moving to the 2026 date. We're talking about class size minimums, 2026. We're talking about school
Yes.
construction starting in 2026. Sort of alignment of these things matters. And I appreciate the very heartfelt and difficult position some other members here are in this one in particular, and then some incremental steps or a bit more time feels pretty appropriate.
So if it's okay with the committee, I'm gonna ask legislative council to put that change in. And I was gonna say what change?
Yeah.
Let's call it the sunsetting of articles of agreement we had.
Do we want a straw poll just to make sure
Yeah,
most people are feeling okay about that change?
let's state clearly what we're gonna.
So sure, feeling okay or willing to compromise, however you want to.
However you want
call
to
it.
say it, yeah.
So this would, say just to move that date from July 1st, 2025 to July 1st, 2026. Everybody who's comfortable making that change? Okay.
Yes, with
Thank
explanation.
you, everybody.
So it's just the effective date,
Just the.
no other substantive changes to that section?
At this point.
All right, let's see if we can.
The underlying piece for that date piece on our. to-do list.
Okay, let's just keep those
Make your day.
straw polls at that level, please.
So this part.
So before we break, one of the trickiest things about being on education or just dealing with education is, there are political party issues, there are geographic issues, there are urban rural issues. You know, this is hard. There are, I'm gonna keep saying that, but I'm sorry. You know, education has always been tricky in Vermont. The road to the date we are at today is littered with things since the sixties, so trying to get a handle on changing demographics. You heard me say yesterday in caucus, the fact is, you know, we have between 30 and 40,000 fewer students, and we really haven't reckoned with that. Both from an educational quality point of view and from a cost point of view. And we're the ones who have to reckon with it, but we need to do it in a way that kind of feels comfortable to everybody. So I just hope we can continue our excellent progress and come out of here with a vote that lets people know that the education committee has done hard work and made good compromises. Aaron?
I just want to add to that, especially since you say like reckon with the financial of losing that many students. I've been thinking about this a lot, barely sleeping, reading a lot, listening to a lot of things. And also, you know, I think it's hard and frustrating for all of us to hear all the things that are outside of our control that are also at play here. As complex as this is, it's not really just about that. All of the cost pressures and the financial aspects of this moment that we are in Vermont and also in many places in the country is also, you know, rising in inflation, rising inequality, healthcare costs, all of these cost pressures. You can take fewer students out. And there's certainly maybe some cost, but you can't, if that doesn't necessarily mean like, well, boom, you ought to be able to save that much per each kid times 40,000, because also, you know, the world has changed since the 1960s. All of these factors that we are facing, like it's so much more complex than that, which is hard. That's a hard story to tell. That's a hard problem to solve, but the just declining enrollment should mean less money is an oversimplification of the reality of the world we live in, the work schools do today, the small state we're in, economic factors on so many levels that are so far beyond all of our control. So that's, I don't have any good, like, it's
You know, and just, well, see, we all had to.
in that.
We all have to keep the big picture in mind. I mean, you can, if you're somebody who, you know, wants to talk about economic development, well, without a strong, robust education system,
You're not gonna get it.
it's gonna be hard to attract people to Vermont. Yes, having to go a little bit further for middle school or high school is a change, but we need schools that are providing a 21st century education to all of our kids if we want people to say Vermont's the place I want to be.
Yeah, you almost said what I was going to say. I just wanted to acknowledge the comments and say that that's all of those reasons and many more are exactly why I feel so compelled to make sure that we are focusing on strengthening our public education system today. And while I appreciate the feeling that many of us have for urgency, I want to make sure we're doing this right, because public education needs to be built on, not weakened in this state. And it's because of so many factors that are going on way outside of our control. So I appreciate the energy put into this.
Anybody else want to make a big
Just
bold statement?
philosophical.
It's actually, I mean,
Mark missing
it
her
can
little
be
right
cathartic. All right. So let's close here.
Okay.
And we will move on. Or we will take a break and sort of everybody kind of be back here, hopefully